for a claimant for the next heir was Jan Jos van der Scamp, and he had not been heard of for years.
At length, one day, a boat was seen pulling for the shore from a long, black, rakish-looking schooner that lay at anchor at the bay.
The boat's crew seemed worthy of the craft from which they debarked. Never had such a set of noisy, slithering violets landed in peaceful Communipaw. They were outlandish in garb and demeanor.
And we're headed by a rough, burly holy rough, with fiery whiskers, a copper nose, a scar across his face, and a great flounderish beaver slouched on one side of his head.
In whom, to their dismay, the quiet inhabitants were made to recognize their early pest, Jan Jost van der Scamp.
The rear of this hopeful gang was brought up by old Pluto, who had lost an eye, grown grizzly-headed, and looked more like a devil.
Van der Scamp renewed his acquaintance with the old brothers, much against their will, and in a manner not at all to their taste. He slapped them familiarly on the back, gave them an iron grip of the hand, and was hail fellow well met. According to his own account, he had been all the world over, had made money by bags full, had ships in every sea, and now meant to turn the wild goose into a country seat, where he and his comrades, all rich merchants from foreign parts, might enjoy themselves in the interval of their voyages.
Sure enough, in a little while, there was a complete metamorphose of the wild goose. From a quiet, peaceful Dutch public house, it became a most riotous, uproarious, private dwelling.
A complete rendezvous for boisterous men of the seas, who came here to have what they call a blowout on dry land, and might be seen at all hours lounging about the door,
or lolling out of the windows, swearing amongst themselves, and cracking rough jokes on every passerby.
The house was fitted up too in so strange a manner. Hammocks slung to the walls instead of bedsteads. Odd kinds of foreign furniture, bamboo couches, Spanish chairs, and pistols, cutlasses, and blunderbusses suspended on every peg.
Silver crucifixes on the mantelpiece, with silver porringers and candlesticks on the tables, contrasting oddly with the pewter and delftware of the original establishment.
And then, the strange amusement of these sea monsters.
pitching Spanish dollars instead of coins, firing blunderbusses out of the window,
Shooting at a mark, whereas any unhappy dog, or cat, or pig, or barn-door fowl that might happen to come within reach.
The only being who seemed to relish their rough waggery was old Pluto.
can't he let but a dog's life of it, where they practice all kinds of mean jokes on him.
Kicked him about like a football,
Shook him by his grisly mop of wool.
and never spoke to him without coupling a curse by way of adjective to his name, and consigning him to the infernal regions.
The fellow, however, seemed to like him the better, the more they cursed him.
Though his utmost expression of pleasure never amounted to more than the growl of a petted bear when his ears are rubbed.
Old Pluto was a ministering spirit at these ages of the wild goose, and such orders act placed there, such drinking, singing, no big
With an occasional interlude of quarreling and fighting.
The noisier grew the more old Pluto cried conversation, until the guests
Sometimes, after a drinking bout, they sallied forth and scoured the village, to the dismay of the worthy burghers, who gathered their women within doors and would have shut up the house.
Vanderskamp, however, was not to be rebuffed. He insisted on renewing acquaintance with his old neighbors and on introducing his friends
The merchants.
to their families. Swore he was on the lookout for a wife, and meant, before he stopped, to find husbands for all their daughters.
So nilly sociable he was.
Swaggered about their best parlors with his hat on one side of his head.
Sat on the good wife's nicely waxed mahogany table, kicking his heels against the carpet and polished legs.
Kissed and tousled the young frowns.
And if they frowned in politics, gave them a gold rosary or a sparkling cross to put them in good humor again.
Sometimes nothing would satisfy him. But he must have some of his old neighbors to dinner at the Wild Goose.
There was no refusing him.
Got the complete upper hand of the community.
And the peaceful burghers all stood in awe of him.
But what a time would the quiet worthy men have in these great fellows, who delight to astound them with the most extravagant gunpowder tales, and border with all kinds of foreign oaths.
Clink the can with them, pledge them in deep potations, bawl drinking songs in their ears.
And occasionally fire pistols over their heads.
Or under the table.
And laugh at their faces and ask them how they like the smell of gunpowder.
Thus was the little village of Communipaw for a time like the unfortunate wife possessed with
Until Vanderskamp and his brother merchants would set sail on another trading voyage. The Wild Goose would be shut up, and everything relapse into quiet, only to be disturbed by the next visitation.
The mystery of all these proceedings gradually dawned upon the tardy intellects of Communipaw. These were the times of the notorious Captain Kidd, when the American harbors were the resorts of piratical adventurers of all kinds, who, under pretext of mercantile voyages, scoured the West Indies, made plundering ascents upon the Spanish main, visited even the west remote Indian seas, and then came to dispose of their booty. calved their rebels, and fed out new expeditions in the English colonies.
Vanderskamp had served in this hopeful school, and having risen to importance among the buccaneers, had pitched upon his native village and early home as a quiet, out-of-the-way, unsuspected place, where he and his comrades, while anchored at New York, might have their feasts and concert their plans without molestation.
At length, the attention of the British government was drawn to these piratical enterprises which had become so frequent and outrageous. Vigorous measures were taken to check and punish them. Several of the most noted freebooters were caught and executed. 3 of Vanderskamp's chosen comrades,
The most riotous swashbucklers of the wild goose.
were hanged in chains on Gibbet Island, in full sight of their favorite resort. As to Vanderskamp himself, he and his man Pluto had again disappeared, and it was hoped by the people of Communipaw that he had fallen in some foreign brawl.
Or been swung on some foreign gallows.
For a time, therefore, the tranquility of the village was restored. The worthy Dutchmen once more smoked their pipes in peace, eyeing with peculiar complacency their old pests and terrors, the pirates, dangling and drying in the sun on Gibbet Island. This perfect calm was doomed at length to be ruffled. The fiery persecution of the pirates gradually subsided. Justice was satisfied with the examples that had been made, and there was no more talk of Kidd and the other heroes of Light Kidney.
Calm summer evening, a boat, somewhat heavily laden, was seen pulling into Communipaw. What was the surprise and disquiet of the inhabitants to see Jan Jost Vanderskamp seated at the helm, and his man Pluto tugging at the oars. Vanderskamp, however, was apparently an altered man.
He brought home with him a wife, who seemed to be a shrewd and slightly apprehended him.
He was no longer the swaggering, bold ruffian. But affected the regular march.
and talked of retiring from business and settling down quietly to pass the rest of his days in his native place.
The Wild Goose Mansion was again open, but with a bit of splendor and notoriety. It is true Vanderskamp frequent nautical visitors.
Yet the sound of merriment was occasionally overheard in his house.
But everything seemed to be done under the rose.
And old Pluto was an early servant and officiated at these orgies.
The visitors were by no means of the turbulent stamp of their predecessors, but quiet, mysterious traders, full of nods, winks, and hieroglyphic signs, with whom, to use their cant phrase,
Everything was small. Their ships came to anchor at night in the lower bay, and on a private signal, Vanderskamp would launch his boat,
And accompanied solely by his man Pluto.
would make them mysterious visits.
Sometimes boats pulled in at night in front of the Wild Goose, and Vanderskamp and his comrades unloaded our various articles of merchandise in the dark. Nobody knew whither.
one of the more curious of the inhabitants kept watch and caught a glimpse of the features of some of these night visitors by the casual glance of a lantern, and declared that he recognized more than one of the freebooting frequenters of the Wild Goose of former times, from whence he concluded that Vanderskamp was at his old game, and the mysterious merchandise was nothing more nor less than piratical plunder.
Some observed that this was no more than Vanderskamp and his comrades, having been driven from their old line of business by the oppressions of government, have now resorted to smuggling to make both ends meet.